A new challenger has approached in the form of McFarlane Toys in an effort to really elaborate on the Arkham Asylum version of Batman. Batman's design in the Arkham series, specifically Asylum and City, in my opinion, are probably the best interpretations of Batman from a design standpoint. I just love how they're able to kind of pay homage to the original design of Batman with the gray and black, while at the same time giving it their own spin and making it a little bit more grounded and tactical for the tone and style of that series. And it was kind of a no-brainer for me to pick up some figures that are representative of that design that I really love. So here we have two figures that I've been owning now for about 5 or 6 years. I think these came out back in, one of them for sure came out in either 2011 or 2012, which is the Arkham City, but specifically they came out around 2013, 2014 as part of a new wave of reissues that were bundled together in 4-packs. And before you see the Asylum version and the City version of Batman from Arkham Asylum and Arkham City. And ideally they're about the same. But entering the game is McFarlane Toys with their own version of the Arkham Asylum Batman. And it's got something to say. Now, before we get to that McFarlane figure, I really want to showcase the prior two figures that I've already owned and reviewed in the past, but just to kind of give them a once-over kind of comparison to really distinguish them from the McFarlane version. And the reason why I'm tackling two at the same time is because with the noticeable differences, you're going to be able to tell that they're kind of similar figures when it comes to what the folks over at DC Collectibles were able to put out. They're ideally about the same figure. They're even using some of the similar sculpting around the legs, the arms, even the chest area are practically the same. They even use the same bat symbol decorated onto there. The notable differences will probably be the gauntlets and the boots. You can definitely see some changes around the actual protective casing and armoring that's going around with the two sets of boots and gauntlets and forearm pads, as well as the gloves and the utility belt. I would probably say the utility belt also has some revisions over them, specifically the pouches on the sides rather than the middle portion itself. And then another big difference, and I think this is exclusively to these versions that came in those 4-packs. They gave the Arkham City version the white Detective Vision eyes as opposed to the actual blue eyes that you see him using, or you see him sporting in the original Arkham Asylum game. So that's the only other noticeable difference, and plus some more Christian Bale-like lips on that City version. So you can definitely see a little bit of tonal change with the face, but other than that, it's similar sculpting, similar look, and overall similar figure. Posability is also about the same. They pretty much both have elbow joints here on each arm, as well as a swivel joint around the gauntlet, and then a ball joint at the very top of each arm that allows the arm to not only move forward about yay much, but then it's able to rotate forwards about that much of amount of movement. 360 degrees on the head, as well as a slight pivot up and down. But of course, like any Batman cowl does, there's a little bit of limitation going on right there. No real chest or abdominal joints to allow movement there. It's all kind of conjoined with this one singular piece, but you do have a little bit of mobility here on the top of the leg, just forwards and backwards, not so much inwards and outwards, nothing like that. And here's the thing, even though it is a little limited on the posability with only one knee joint there and a slight boot pivot there on the midway point of the shin, they're built like a fucking ox, just like Batman himself is. He's a tank. And the figures are actually no exception. DC Collectibles actually did a phenomenal job at the sculpting and the quality of the plastic itself. Of course, that's not without its flaws. One of the joints here, I'm being very careful of messing with it a little bit too much. This elbow joint right here actually broke. If I finesse this arm right here a little too much, it's gonna come apart, and that just comes with the years. It's been ideally about 5 or 6 years since the making of these figures, since the purchase of these figures, and naturally with a lot of movement, especially when being used for stop motions or reviews, that's has a tendency to happen, especially if you bend it the wrong way like I did. So with that said, the joints could use some tender loving care, but the actual pieces that are then conjoined together with them, such as these brawn, thick daddy legs that you see before you here. They're sculpted really well. And if you weren't convinced that they were ideally the same figure minus the noticeable differences between Asylum and City, then the accessories are probably going to be in the exact same field. Both of them came with an open and closing Batarang, like this one right here. Unfortunately, again, another victim of the years that have since passed, one of the boomerangs, or batarangs rather, have actually broken, and I wasn't able to reassemble them because they're very tiny little, there's a tiny little peg or screw inside of the middle portion of this batarang, and it just completely broke off. And it's so minuscule that it's very difficult to either glue or, you know, stick together. So I was like, you know what, that's done. And plus they're ideally about the same accessories, so I can kind of swap them in and out between the two figures. But you do have this open and closable Batarang right here that opens and closes like so. And both of them come with their own interpretation of the grapple gun. Except this is the Arkham Asylum grapple gun. It's pretty standard. It's all coated in this chrome-like blue paint, and there's some noticeable details going on right here, but nothing too crazy or extraordinary, except for this grapple portion that does come off very easily, and like I mentioned in my original review, very easy to lose, especially since it's not tied by any string or comes with any additional function to be able to shoot. Whereas the Arkham City version comes with a much more detailed and even some extra sculpted grappling gun right here that even comes with an additional handle and more complex sculpting and detail going on here at the forward part of the gun itself. It still kind of retains the aesthetic look going on right here in this back portion, but as you can see, some other changes of color were thrown in with this metallic chrome-like paint jobs going on right there. And like I said before, it came with an identical Batarang just like this one, but unfortunately it broke, so I don't really have it available here to show. But they also threw in the glue gun, or the explosive gel gun that you see before you right here, so that you can utilize it to endlessly try to find that goddamn room in Arkham Asylum that hints at Arkham City, except I, for the life of me, could not find it. But a new challenger has approached in the form of McFarlane Toys in an effort to really elaborate on the Arkham Asylum version of Batman. And here he is. In fact, I have to kind of move him up a little bit because once you see him, you can immediately tell he's a bigums. He is, in fact, a bigums. McFarlane Toys went the extra mile of making him just a little taller than the original DC collectible figures. Those were originally 6 inches. McFarlane aimed for, I want to say, 6.5 to 7. I think with the pointed ears, he is, in fact, reaching 7 inches overall. And man, he looks like a beast. As you can tell, the overall aesthetic look of the McFarlane version of the Arkham Asylum Batman is overall the same, except you can definitely see some added paint job quality, texturing, sculpting is going on. Even though it may not feel as robust as far as the actual plastic quality, especially like I said for them thighs, it's still very much there to kind of deliver the message that this is in fact that tankier version of Batman from the Arkham series by Rocksteady. And just like with the original Asylum and City versions of these figures, there are some noticeable differences. You can definitely tell that there is a much more bulkiness to the utility belt. The utility belt looks nice. It's painted better, it's sculpted better, it's exaggeratedly a little bigger than the previous ones, but it definitely gives it its own unique look and feel. The ears on his head, on his cowl, are a little bit more elongated, but to be honest, that's actually a little bit more accurate to how those ears look like on his original costume in the Arkham games. Now, what's not exactly too incredibly accurate is that bat symbol on his chest. You can noticeably see that it's much different than either of the Asylum or City's versions, and frankly that's actually a deviation. The Asylum and City versions that you see on his left and right are more accurate to the version that we have in the games rather than the McFarlane version here, to kind of make it seem like McFarlane is going in their own stylized version of these characters, or with their own line. Almost every version of Batman that they've tackled, whether it be in video game form, in live action form, or even in animated form, there's always a wrinkle of something that they changed to make it their own. And it looks like this time around it's the bat symbol that you see on his chest. Along with that, you got some added padding textures and details going on in his armor and his chest and his abdomen to give it that much more distinguished look. And I dare say that even his face is a little bit better than the other two. He doesn't go for the detective vision wide eyes that has its own little quirk that I enjoy, but he has a much more focused and intimidating look like he did in the games, as opposed to the slightly coked out Arkham Asylum version that I own here. And also, again, the elongated ears really, it deliver that message that this really does look like the Arkham Asylum version from Rocksteady, along with the cape. The cape is also sculpted wonderfully well, especially around his shoulder area, and as we rotate it around, it's got a much more macabre Tim Burton-esque kind of look to the sculpting of the cape, even when with that dripped middle portion there in the middle of the top portion of around his neck area and back shoulder area. And it also has some other spikes and more enunciated creases going on as you kind of work your way down the capes themselves. So overall, really happy of the actual presentation of McFarlane's figure thus far. And you already saw the posability functions for the other two figures, so ideally they're about the same. McFarlane, on the other hand, they actually have a selling point, which is that they, on the box, say that these figures, almost all of their McFarlane toy line figures, have a 22 moving part system. All of their figures have 22 moving parts. And it so far looks like Arkham Asylum Batman here is no exception. He is actually meticulous with the posability. There's some standard ones that you'd expect, like the one at the elbow, as well as the legs, but what's noticeable right away is that they're actually ratcheted. You can actually feel the ratchetity feeling of the elbows right here. You have a bicep swivel right there to allow for movement horizontally. And then you even have two joints in the shoulder. One of them is the traditional ball joint, but then the other one is kind of like a shoulder pivot to kind of adjust. As you can see right there, you can kind of adjust the shoulder upwards and inwards to kind of give him a slouched look or a much more formidable look, to kind of broaden the shoulders. And there is also an abdominal joint to allow for movement horizontally, as you can see right there, kind of give him the old twist and shout. And then, of course, you do have a 360-degree head swivel right there. And it can pivot up and down. It actually pivots up much higher than even the other two figures. And then over on his gauntlets, there's really not much possibility going on right there. But then he's got a ball joint on his wrist that allows the hands to not only move 360 degrees, but also can incline inwards and outwards like so. Now, the only little nitpick that I have with that is that the ball joint is quite exposed, that from a certain angle his hand, specifically from his forearm, can look a little funky. It's just a tiny bit, because you have this really burly piece right here with the gauntlet, only to then have the ball joint right there in the middle and kind of make his hand look a little skinnier than you would expect. But hey, if it gives posability and different options for posing, then that's fine by me. And then, kind of officially differentiating itself from the other two figures, you have joints here at the top of the legs that do a really interesting thing. For one, they're able to move, of course, up and down like so, that far back and that far forward, but they can also go inwards and outwards, and doing so, you can also feel more ratchety joints on the horizontal or the x-axis of those joints. The other thing that I noticed right away that's really cool for McFarlane to have done is that they actually made the underwear piece a separate rubber piece than that of the legs. So whenever you actually move the legs, there is a sense of authenticity to the way that the costume kind of operates. You can kind of see right there that it's actually a separate piece, and it does a good job of hiding the joint right there to, again, not break that illusion in any matter of speaking. So that's pretty dope. And then you actually have a double joint right there at the knee for full posability, and it's also ratcheted as well. So that's very robust and very tight, so that poses are locked in place. You don't have a boot swivel at the shin like the other figures before, but once again, the ball joint from the wrist makes a return here in the ankle, so you're able to kind of pivot in and out, upwards and downwards, and then rotate the foot 360 degrees if you so choose. So there's a lot of option right there, but that's not all. You actually do have a toe joint right there so that you're able to give them that as well. So posability for this guy, I've actually already played with him a handful of times, and you can in fact pose him in probably the most Batman-y of ways if you so choose, especially with the accessories that he comes with. Now, before I get to the accessories, the only other nitpick that I will probably mention that I came across while kind of preparing for this review is that the cape is a little longer than the others, and because of that, even though he may look cool with it, at times, especially if you don't pose him right, it does make the figure a little top heavy and prone to falling over. So you got to make sure that the cape is kind of out of the way, pulled back as much far back as you can, otherwise that could cause an issue. Accessories also get a little bit of a makeover. You have, of course, your standard Batarang right there. It's even textured and painted and color coded the same way as this gauntlet, so they have that feeling of rustiness going on, and that's pretty damn dope. Now, they threw in another accessory that looks cool, but it doesn't have that great of a functionality. It's actually a closed Batarang. Why they didn't just give us a Batarang that can open in and out, kind of like they did with Arkham Asylum, is beyond me. I don't know if it was like a cost-effective thing, but they simply just threw in a folded Batarang as a secondary accessory. This is probably the only area where the Arkham Asylum and Arkham City figures from DC Collectibles have a one-up on this one. And then they threw in this thing. It's a capsule of some kind. I honestly cannot remember when this capsule was used in Arkham Asylum. My guess is that it's probably a container that holds the gel that's used for the gel gun, except he didn't come with the gel gun, so this piece, I honestly, and it's funny because I played that game like 3 times by now, and I cannot remember 100% what this was. So if you guys remember by some chance, let me know in the comments below. But to me, the piece of resistance of accessories for the McFarlane figure is this bad boy right here. It is in fact the really crazy looking grapple gun that's a little different from the one that you see in the actual game itself. This is another liberty that McFarlane Toys came up with here for their version of the figure, except I actually am really down for it because, as you can see, this thing is steampunk like a motherfucker, and I'm loving it. I love how it still incorporates some look and design aesthetics from the Arkham Asylum game. So for comparison, you have the Arkham City grapple gun that I was showing up before, and the new one. And you can see this grip right here is reincorporated here. Of course, it's using the texturized paint job from the gauntlets that McFarlane specializes in, except again, aesthetic and design wise, you got this tank and this pipe and this cord going on right here that gives it a much more steampunk kind of look. But I'm down for it. I'm down for it. This is very much Batman. I could definitely see him holding this, albeit it's a little difficult to get in his hands. I've tried a couple of times, and both times I feel like I've failed, but otherwise, this is the accessory that really makes up this figure right here, and this is one of the reasons why McFarlane is really excelling at giving these figures a really nice, albeit very unique makeover. And there you have a little bit of my comparison between the DC Collectibles Arkham Asylum and Arkham City figures, along with the McFarlane Toys Batman Arkham Asylum version that they recently released as part of their new line. And so far, I definitely dig and understand what McFarlane Toys is trying to do here with their versions of the figures. I would have liked if, again, that Batman symbol was more accurate to the one that you see in the game itself, but I would gladly give that sacrifice to then take the posability, the added textures and paint jobs, the robustness, the increase in size, wink wink nudge nudge, as well as the accessories that sure could have been a little desired to have that opening Batarang, but that grapple gun though is woohoo, and the posability is just wonder, especially for someone who aspires to do stop motion animation myself. This opens up the possibilities endlessly, and this is honestly so far, I've only had it for a limited amount of time, but this is already becoming one of my favorite Batman Arkham figures. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Make sure to click this other video that's showing up on screen now for some more Batman or Spider-Man goodness, and as always guys, stay safe and stay humble. See you later.